This is TMN.
In New York City.
All right, so Noah, thank you for joining us today to talk a little bit about the Teens Media Network. We're
glad to be
excited to
here.
have you here. Reaching out to other teens, like what would you say to them about why it's important to be able to have an experience like this?
When you're a teenager, obviously people are always like, well, what are you going to do with your life? How are you going to make money and make a living for yourself? And it can get very monotonous coming home and doing just homework or just essays or just planning for college and just applying for colleges. So having a bit of unstructured time to yourself to do whatever, whether that be art or filming, or even just playing games and recording it for yourself to post wherever, makes you feel like you're not trapped into doing just the same thing all the time, 24/7, 365. So, and being able to do that with other people who share your interests, it's finally like you finally found your people, and these are the people that you can really be yourself around. It's definitely a surreal experience, and I would urge anybody who's having trouble expressing their passion to people or can't find a place to express themselves and use their talent. I think this is a great way to do that.
Well, I love that answer, and I love the fact that you are touching on the fact that you found a group that you're comfortable with, and it kind of fits right into that aspect of belonging. So,
Absolutely.
Share a story with us, possibly about like where you felt like, well, I really belong, like it kind of clicked for you.
Well, that took a long time for that to happen. I was 2.5 years old when I discovered Thomas the Tank Engine. And I had all the toys, all the wooden ones, the little metal ones, the ones with magnets, the ones with motors. And that pretty much took up most of my free time as a kid, especially coming home from school. I remember bringing stuff into kindergarten and the other kids in my class wanting to play with them. And it's one of those shows that I feel like is very misunderstood, especially in the later years. But when I started to grow older, I never really grew out of it. There was always something that was very gravitating towards watching these characters and their experiences. And there was some sort of connection that couldn't be broken. It was something that almost transcended age. And the struggle there was I always had trouble explaining why I gravitated towards it. So when other people would ask me about it, I kind of just never really knew the answer. And I would always struggle with being bullied in school because I was still holding on to this, something people would think, oh, it's in the past, let go of it, but I couldn't. So that's when I got into middle school, and sixth grade was definitely the hardest part of my life so far. It was definitely the point where I wouldn't say depressed at all, but I was coming home from school and finding it hard to muster the energy to continue with the next day. But I was still always finding it difficult to express myself to other people. Like my parents have been very supportive, but a lot of my peers really didn't understand where I was getting at. And at that point, I had started filming. But it was very unprofessional. Like I didn't have a set. I was mostly just setting stuff up on the floor in my room and just doing whatever. I wasn't following a script. I was just being creative, like improv behind the camera. But then I found out it was May 2019. I think I was going out for my sister's birthday, and I had heard about a train show that was happening in August of that year. It was the Greenberg Train and Toy Show, and a bunch of people in the Thomas fan community were going there. And one of the exhibitions that was going to be there was several of the original props that were used on the Thomas show. It used to be filmed with model trains. So several of the screen-used props, people in the community had bought them from the prop store in London, and they had restored them, and they were going to be putting them on display. And I had to go see that. So my mom and my grandmother took me there, and I met all these people that I had been watching on YouTube since I was, probably in like kindergarten. And I found YouTube and I watched all these videos by these really talented people filming with the wooden trains or computer-generated trains. Some people would remake the episodes from the show. People would write their own stories, or they would show off their collections of, or their layouts that they had built. So it was so surreal seeing all these users that I had known exclusively through YouTube, and they didn't know who I was, of course, but I knew them. So that was really the first time I felt like I belonged, and obviously seeing the models up close was so surreal. After watching them through the TV screen and thinking I would never be able to get to see them. It was so cool. And then the next show I went to was in 2021, and I was able to bring some of my own models along and show people. And finally being able to show those people my work.
It's been very validating.
It was. I got so many pointers on how to correct my work behind the scenes. But then the biggest experience was November of last year. The Greenberg show was back in Edison, New Jersey. And I went there and they had the props on display. They had an entire layout. They call it Gauge 1, which is, if anybody watching knows about model trains, it's basically the British version of G-scale. And that is the scale they filmed with Thomas. So they had a bunch of replicas of the props on display, and they had an entire table that was like a community table, so people who came along for the show could put their own models on display. And I did that with a friend, and it was really, really validating. People came over, I had tons of people ask me questions about my models, and people recognized where the models were coming from and what they related back to. So I had finally found my people. That was my moment where I realized I had found people that could really understand what I was all about and why I'm still into Thomas. And I feel that, like I said, Thomas is a very misunderstood franchise. And I think at its core, it was a show for kids, but really it transcended age. And I think that the Class 6 series of Thomas is very special in that regard, and that's why it is so special to me, because it brought me to my passion, which is filmmaking. And whether or not I'll be filming with Thomas in the future, that's to be decided. But it really is the vehicle that really got my passion off the ground and what made me find my people. So Thomas is very special to me and always will be.
Well, I love so much that you shared that, and the idea that you had this passion and you were drawn to this and you weren't going to leave it behind because others might question it. And I think that's so important that you stuck with it. And I think that's a big takeaway, like that you can share with others, other teens and other youths that might have something that they're really connected to but aren't sure that others share that, and that's okay, because that's what it's true and authentic.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway there is just you don't let anybody get in the way of your interests. You don't let anybody talk you down from doing what you love, and that's what I learned from that whole experience. I'm very grateful for that.
Well, thank you again for sharing that. That's a great message about one of the aspects of the Teens Media Network that's so important, is that aspect of belonging. We want everyone to know that they are welcome and that they have a place here, to know that that's there.